Hello, this is Julie Hester, and I'm going to show you how to use the for loop. The for loop is a great choice when you know in advance how many times you want to execute the loop. The for loop is my favorite loop, and I use it more than the other two. Its format is different from the other two loops, so let's see this in an example. I'm going to show you here in Visual Studio how to create a for loop to print the numbers from 1 to 5. I have already started the program for you. Let's get started. We begin by typing 4 and a set of parentheses. In the other two loops, we put a test expression in the parentheses. Here is where the for loop is different. Instead of a test expression, we are going to put 3 things in the parentheses, and each will be separated by a semicolon. The first part is initialization. Here we can either create a variable or we can use one that already exists. I don't have a variable, so here I'm going to create an integer and I'm going to call it I. And I'm going to initialize this variable I to 1. After we finish the initialization part, we're going to put a semicolon. The next part is the test condition. This works just like it does in the while and the do while loops. Since we want to print numbers from 1 to 5, we will continue to execute the loop as long as I is less than or equal to 5. Since I've finished the test condition, I am once again going to end it with a semicolon. And then the final part is the update statement. Each time the loop executes, we want to increment our control variable I. So it's easy just to say I++. And there's the heading of the for loop. Now after we build the header, we just need to put in the body of the for loop. The body of the for loop is not going to need to be concerned with modifying our control variable. We just need the code that we are trying to accomplish with the for loop. I'm just going to simply print the value of I separated by a space. Well, I'll say cout, the insertion operator, I, and then I'm going to follow it by a single space. This way, each of the values will print on the same line and will be separated by a space. Now, just like in the other two loops, we can enclose multiple statements with curly braces, as I have done here. I only have a single statement, so the braces here are optional, but I went ahead and put them in there because later I might decide to add another statement and then I will need to have the curly braces. All right, so now that the loop is finished, I'm going to print a line break on the console window. And my program's finished. So let's compile and run the program. I don't need to run it in debug mode, so I'm going to say start without debugging, or it could have used Control F5. Now I can see my output as it begins to build the project. Here is where it is compiling the project, and then I can see that it created an executable called demoproject.exe. Now when I look at my console window, I see the numbers 1 through 5 with a space separating each one, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. Now that we have seen the for loop in action, let's talk about some other facts about the for loop. Just like the while loop, the for loop is a pretest loop. Remember, that means if the test condition is never true, the loop will not execute at all. So if I was never less than or equal to 5, then we would never execute the body of this loop. You saw me use the letter I as my variable or incrementer. I is often used in for loops when we don't already have another variable that we need for something else. Think incrementer or incrementation, and you can see why we like to use the letter I. Also, in the loop heading, each of the 3 parts is optional. If we want to omit one of the parts, we still need to include the 2 semicolons, but we can leave any of the 3 parts blank. Now, when we initialize multiple variables, we can do this by separating them with a comma. So I'm going to create another variable, another integer variable, and I'm going to call it multiplier. I'm not going to give it a value at this time. Instead, I'm going to initialize multiplier inside my for loop heading. I'm going to put a comma after the 1, and I'm going to set multiplier to 10. So when the for loop begins to execute, 2 things will happen first. A variable I will be created and initialized to 1, and the existing variable multiplier will be initialized to 10. Now that we have added the multiplier variable, I'm going to use it to multiply I by its value when I print I out. And now I expect to see numbers like 10, 20, and 30, and so forth. All right, I'm going to go ahead and compile and execute the program again. And now we see 10, 20, 30, and so on, just like we expected. Another thing we can do is we can change how I is modified. Here, I'm incrementing I by 1, and that's often what we do, but we don't have to do it this way. We could start I at a value that's higher and decrement it each time the loop executes, or we can add a different value to I. So, if I wanted to use the first 5 odd values, I could increment I by 2. So I'm going to change this to say plus equal 2. That will add the value of 2 to whatever I is each time the loop executes. So now I will be 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9. But wait, there's a problem. My test condition says I has to be less than or equal to 5. So if I really do want the first 5 odd numbers, I need to change the boundary on my test condition, and I'm going to change this 5 to a 10. All right, let's see what happens now. And now I get 10, 30, 50, 70, 90. Remember, we were multiplying I by 10, and we were incrementing I by 2. So the values of I were 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9, but we multiplied each of those values by 10.